Today it's time to break some chains because we're looking at the Knight Preceptor and the special character for Imperial Knights, Canis Rex. Hello again and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're going to be continuing in our look at the Imperial Knights Codex. We've looked through most of the book now, we've only got a few units left to go, so why not have a look at the newest knight that Games Workshop has come out with, and put that las impulsor under the microscope. In this video we'll take a look at the rules for the Knight Preceptor and Canis Rex, take a look at some of the obvious combos and stratagems, and we'll have a quick chat about how I'd field one on the field of battle. In the background, Knight Preceptors are armed with the las impulsor, a blistering close-ranged heavy weapon, whose manufacture is not very well known throughout the Imperium. They are often piloted by the household arms masters, or other grizzled nobles who are adept at training knight armigers and lead by example on the battlefield. Sir Hekhtur the Chainbreaker pilots one of these knight suits, known as Canis Rex, and was the last noble surviving of his line when the forces of the Iron Warriors overran his homeworld. Despite being separated from his knight suit, Canis Rex broke free of its restraints and carved a path to him with its las impulsor. He escaped from his captivity and freed a number of his planet's inhabitants and made his escape on an Imperial frigate, gaining himself the Chainbreaker as his moniker in the process. So let's see what these las impulsors can do for us on the battlefield. We'll take a look at the Knight Preceptor first. This is a Lord of War choice for Imperial Knights, and at space will set you back 417 points. It has exactly the same stat line as the Errant Warden and Paladin, 24 wounds, 4 attacks, and degrades in exactly the same way at the various brackets. At base it's armed with a Reaper Chainsword, las impulsor, heavy stubber and titanic feet. It can take the usual options of carapace weapons, the Ironstorm missile pod, Storm Spear missile pod or Twin Icarus autocannon, and can trade out the heavy stubber for either a missile launcher or, interestingly, a multi-laser. The multi-laser only costs 5 points and the heavy stubber costs 2, so it will cost 3 points to upgrade your heavy stubber to a multi-laser. The weapons have exactly the same profile other than the multi-laser is strength 6. So basically this will add a very small amount of extra anti-infantry firepower to your knight. The extra 3 points are a fairly trivial difference. I could very easily either happily stick with the heavy stubber or upgrade to the multi-laser. They'll have different advantages in different circumstances, but neither of them are going to have too big a difference on the effect of the game. The las impulsor is the thing we really need to focus on, and it's an interesting weapon with 2 different weapon profiles. It can either fire on low intensity with a 36-inch range, heavy 2d6, strength 6, AP -2 and damage d3, or it can fire on high intensity with an 18-inch range, heavy d6, strength 12, AP -4 and damage d6. So at low intensity it's kind of a worse Avenger Gatling cannon because instead of 12 shots you get 2d6 shots, and otherwise the damage profile is fairly similar. D3 damage isn't quite as good as flat 2 damage that the Avenger Gatling cannon has. The high intensity version is for the most part a worse thermal cannon, and it's worse because at 18 inches the thermal cannon would usually have its melter rule of 2d6 pick the highest when you're rolling for the damage. This one does have strength 12 rather than strength 9 that the thermal cannon has, but the only difference that that's going to make is either against toughness 5 and 6 where you'll be wounding on a 2-up rather than a 3-up, though in general toughness 5 and 6 units aren't going to be the optimal target of a high strength anti-tank weapon, and it can also be quite useful against anything toughness 9 or 10, say for example fortifications or chaos knights using that bonus that they can get up to toughness 9 with. So it's an interesting weapon. It's not quite as good as either the Avenger Gatling cannon or the thermal cannon in its respective roles, but it does have the option of being able to choose between those roles, making it quite flexible. For a quick look at the rest of the datasheet, we can replace the Reaper Chainsword with the Thunderstrike Gauntlet, which is certainly an option. You'd have the opportunity to buy in the Paragon Gauntlet in some matchups that demanded it, and your knight would be a bit better against punching knights. Typically I'd normally stick with the Reaper Chainsword myself, unless I was particularly going down that strategy route. Like all knights, it has an Iron Shield for 5-up invul save, it can explode to potentially deal d6 mortal wounds to everyone within 2d6 inches, and it's got the super heavy Walker special rule which lets it fall back, shoot, charge and fall back over infantry. One unique rule that the Preceptor has is the Mentor special rule. This will allow you to reroll hit rolls of 1 for friendly Armature class units within 6 inches of this model. So it's essentially a captain for knights, but only for Armature class units. Now, if you were going to be taking some Armatures anyway, then this is actually really quite a strong buff. A flat 17% damage increase over the course of the game could really help you gun down some more enemies. We've talked about this a bit already in the Armature videos. I could potentially see a build with a Knight Preceptor in the front of, say, 3 Warglaives out the front and a couple of Helverins trailing behind. So the Warglaives could eat any charges and get closer for their melter weapons, and hopefully the Helverins could remain safe behind the Preceptor and the Warglaives and dish out some autocannon fire as the squadron moves up. You could further augment this with the Helm Dominus, a relic that would let you select a target within 24 inches and give all those friendly armatures a +1 to hit against that target for the shooting phase. So overall, the Knight Preceptor is a knight that has more flexibility than its other Questoris counterparts in terms of firepower, but doesn't really quite have the raw strength of either the Thermal Cannon or the Avenger Gatling Cannon, despite costing more points than either, once you've taken into account the Knight's chassis cost. Now let's move on to have a quick look at Canis Rex himself, and how he differs from your Knight Preceptor. Sir Hekhtur and Canis will set you back 450 points, so you could see him as a 33 point upgrade on your regular Knight Preceptor. For that you get the multi-laser and the Thunderstrike Gauntlet called Freedom's Hand. He has the exact same stat line as other Imperial Knights, with one subtle and good difference, in that he has a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2 up base rather than 3 up. This will degrade at 12 wounds to go down to 3 up, and then at 6 wounds on its lowest bracket it will drop to 4 up. We've already been over the Las Impulsor, so what about Freedom's Hand then? Freedom's Hand is a Thunderstrike Gauntlet that gives you strength times 2, so strength 16, AP minus 4, and damage 2d6, but if it rolls less than a 6, it counts as being 6. So it's kind of a Thunderstrike Gauntlet that has the chance to do a bunch of extra wounds on top of its normal damage for every damaging hit it gets through. Unlike the Paragon Gauntlet, you still subtract 1 from the hit roll, so he'll usually be hitting on a 3 up if he uses this weapon. In addition to these nice statline buffs, he does have a couple of fun special rules. When Canis Rex loses its last wound, presuming it isn't destroyed, Sir Hekhtur can be deployed anywhere within 3 inches of the knight. He's treated as if he were a passenger just getting out of a transport vehicle, so that means you have to roll a dice, and on a 1 he is slain. From there, he's essentially a fairly standard infantry model. Movement 6, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3 up, strength and toughness 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 9, and a 4 up save. He's armed with a nice little Archaeotech pistol, which is a 15-inch pistol, strength 5, AP minus 2, and 2 damage. If he gets lucky, he might smoke something like a Primaris Marine, but it's more of a fun little rule than something that you can assume is going to do definite damage. One of the most interesting things about this rule is that the model doesn't actually count as being slain until Sir Hekhtur has been killed himself. So your opponent doesn't get a kill point, and if he's your warlord, then he doesn't get to slay the warlord for it until Sir Hekhtur is also dead. Incidentally, if Sir Hekhtur is your warlord, then he gets the Fearsome Reputation warlord trait that makes your opponent's leadership -1 if they're within 12 inches and -2 if they're within 6 inches. Unfortunately, it's probably one of the worst traits out of the Knight book, which is a bit of a shame really. Before Canis Rex goes down, it also has another little fluffy special rule called chainbreaker, which means that when an Imperial model flees due to morale and is within 6 inches of Canis Rex, you roll a dice and on a roll of a 6 the model doesn't flee. While this is quite fluffy and fun, it doesn't really have that much of an impact on the game because morale rarely makes any difference anyway, unless you're playing an army with a lot of decently sized low leadership squads such as Imperial Guardsmen, and it's not really going to make much difference anyway if 1/6 of those guardsmen that would have run away no longer run away. It's just not going to make much difference to the entire game whatsoever. It's worth noting that Canis Rex does have one disadvantage over the Preceptor, in that Canis Rex doesn't get that mentor ability, so you can't use him to give those Armature Warglaives or Helverins reroll 1s to hit. He does have other disadvantages as well, such as not being able to take a Carapace weapon, which is quite an annoying disadvantage, and of course he can't take any relics because he already has Freedom's Hand. So overall, Canis Rex is another las impulsor Imperial Knight, with weapon skill and ballistic skill 2 up, a fancy gauntlet that punches extra hard, and a fun special rule of the pilot being able to get out, potentially hit some enemy troops with his pistol, or potentially just deny the kill to your opponent in any mission that's a big deal. So how would I use these guys on the battlefield? With the Knight Preceptor, I'd be very tempted to take a carapace weapon option. I'm a particular fan of the Ironstorm missile pods. If you're not taking anything else, then it's usually worth sticking one of those on a shooting knight, as they're very good firepower for just 16 points. I could happily either take the Reaper Chainsword or change it out for a Thunderstrike Gauntlet, and happily either take the Heavy Stubber or upgrade to the Multi-Laser, as both of those options are very similar in points cost. I think that both of these knights with their las impulsors are typically going to be wanting to close with the foe. You typically want to be starting somewhere towards the front of your deployment zone, thinking which las impulsor rounds you want to be using each turn, and setting yourself up to optimize that shot. If an enemy heavy is closing, you might think about putting them within 18 inches to activate that focused mode. If you're just frying some enemy infantry, then you have more flexibility with your positioning. You can either back off to keep out of harm's way, or hopefully set yourself up for a charge on another enemy unit in the fight phase. Canis Rex in particular is incredibly nasty in the fight phase, against enemy heavy hitters such as knights. That 2-up weapon skill and Freedom's Hand giving you a bunch of extra damage over a regular Thunderstrike Gauntlet are both incredibly nice benefits to have when fighting other enemy heavy hitters. As both of these are both shooting and close combat Questoris pattern knights, they can use a large amount of the stratagems out of the book. It's worth noting that Canis Rex himself is a Questor Imperialis class knight, so doesn't have access to Machine Spirit Resurgent, which is a bit annoying, but he does have access to Valiant Last Stand, which is certainly worth considering when he dies, to get one last hail of las impulsor fire off, or to hopefully drag something down with him with Freedom's Hand. Most of the other stratagems are fairly similar to the Knight, Errant, Warden and Paladin, so I won't go over them again now. If you'd like to have a look at them in a bit more detail, I've discussed them a bit more in my video where I talked about those knights. The Knight Preceptor, as we mentioned, has the option to be surrounded in a gaggle of Warglaves or Helverins. I think interestingly enough it's a bit more suited to supporting the Warglaves, as between having a massive close combat weapon and having the las impulsor's reasonably short range, it doesn't really just want to be sitting at the back of your army not using any of those good abilities. So re-rolling ones on those Warglaves in the shooting and fight phase is certainly an option to squeeze a bit more efficiency out of them, particularly when comboed with the Helm Dominus. So now we come to the tricky question of which one is better, and whether I would take one over the regular Questoris pattern knights. I think for the extra 33 points you get a fairly decent return on Canis Rex. 2-up weapon skill and ballistic skill is a very nice upgrade, and having Sir Hekhtur come out to either be an annoyance or deny victory points is another nice bonus. It is irritating that it does lock you out of taking some options such as the carapace weapon, and from being a Questor Mechanicus knight, and having access to things such as Machine Spirit Resurgent. I think the two are fairly balanced between each other, and if you did want to field a las impulsor knight, either option is perfectly valid. In my opinion though, I'm not really the biggest fan of this las impulsor compared with the other options we have available. Both options stack up fairly poorly against the Knight Paladin with its rapid fire battle cannon, and the Knight Paladin is about the same points cost. The rapid fire battle cannon flatly outclasses the disperse mode of the las impulsor. It's got the exact same profile except the battle cannon is strength 8, which is frankly a really big upgrade. It's also about the same power against virtually any vehicle that doesn't have a 2-up save, compared with the focused mode of the las impulsor. And again, the focus mode only has an 18-inch range, and the rapid fire battle cannon can hit basically anything on the board. For these reasons, I just can't really recommend the Preceptor over the Paladin in good conscience. To my mind, in competitive play, the only potential use it has is if you're buffing up a bunch of armigers, but I do think that you'd have to buy quite a lot of armigers to get your best value out of that strategy. I'm talking to the tune of 5 or 6 of them. Canis Rex unfortunately suffers from a lot of the same problems. If he had the option of taking different armaments instead of just the las impulsor, I'd be a lot more impressed, as weapon skill and ballistic skill 2-up is very good. It's just a shame that he's locked into that currently slightly underwhelming weapon loadout. For the same cost as Sir Hekhtur, you could get a Knight Crusader with thermal cannon and Avenger cannon, and just have an enormous amount more firepower. Admittedly, Sir Hekhtur has a lot more anti-armor combat prowess, but I don't think that that's worth giving up having an entire extra main cannon to have. All that being said, he is an interesting option. He certainly does some things that no other Imperial Knight can do at the moment. I just think that his points cost are, as it stands, currently a bit prohibitive. I guess we can cross our fingers for chapter approved to redress the balance a bit, and hopefully allow these guys to become a bit more viable compared with their Questoris brothers. I'd very much like to hear your opinions on the subject. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh on the las impulsor, but as far as I can tell the maths just backs up going for one of the other 3 Questoris weapon loadouts. If you have any ideas for how best you'd fix it, maybe just lower the points, maybe make the las impulsor a bit stronger, I'm not sure, but I'd very much like to hear it down in the comments. As always, let me know if I've got any rules wrong or made any mistakes anywhere. Feel free to subscribe for more Imperial Knight and Space Marine videos, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.